Prologue: the walls that whisper. Every once in a while, a thriller appears that doesn't just rely on jump scares or quick edits, it builds dread slowly, like water rising behind a locked door. Safe House, 2025, is one such film. It takes a familiar setting, a remote, well-fortified house meant to protect its occupants, and turns it into something claustrophobic and unpredictable. The film transforms safety into suffocation and trust into paranoia. Rather than presenting itself as another high-octane action thriller, Safe House chooses subtle terror. It's not about who's outside the house, it's about what happens inside when fear starts to breed mistrust. Director Jonathan Reeve approaches the narrative like a psychological experiment, testing how far ordinary people can go when cornered by both danger and doubt. The result is a story that's not just about survival, it's about identity, truth, and the thin line between reality and imagination. Visually, the film feels grounded yet haunting. Every shot, every flicker of light seems designed to make you question what's real. Reeve doesn't want the audience to feel comfortable, he wants them to listen to the silence. Because in this movie, silence speaks louder than screams. Chapter 1: The Storm Before the Silence. The opening of Safe House wastes no time setting the tone. A storm brews outside a modern yet eerily isolated house. The camera glides slowly through the empty halls, tracing the outlines of furniture, doorways, and reflections that seem almost alive. Before a single word is spoken, the film establishes its first truth: this is not just a location. This is a character. The house itself breathes with tension, its stillness humming beneath the sound of thunder. Our protagonists arrive, a small group of strangers, each with a reason to hide, each carrying secrets that weigh heavier than the rain outside. They've come seeking safety, yet their eyes reveal something else: guilt, exhaustion, and a quiet sense of dread. The film's pacing here is deliberate. The dialogue is sparse, but the camera lingers on faces, on micro-expressions that reveal what words cannot. There's an unsettling rhythm in the way the group moves through the space, like they've stepped into a trap built from their own fears. Reeve doesn't rely on exposition to explain who they are or why they're here. Instead, he trusts the audience to piece it together through small gestures, the way one character locks the door twice, the nervous glance another gives to the darkened window. It's a subtle form of storytelling, minimal, but deeply effective. Every action feels loaded, as if one wrong move could break the fragile peace they've built. And then comes the quiet. The power flickers. The sound of the storm fades just enough for the audience to hear the creaks of the house, the heartbeat of the film. In that silence, tension grows like a shadow, invisible but undeniable. This is where Safe House begins to reveal its central question: when safety becomes confinement, how long before protection turns into fear? Chapter 2: A House That Breathes Fear. Few thrillers manage to make architecture feel alive, but Safe House does it masterfully. The production design is minimal yet meticulously crafted. Cold metal, soft lighting, and long corridors give the sense that the house was designed to be perfect, too perfect. It's a place meant for protection, but it doesn't welcome its guests. The walls seem to watch. The windows reflect more than they reveal. Reeve and cinematographer Dana Michaels use light and shadow as emotional tools. Daytime scenes feel sterile and colorless, as if hope has been drained from the world. At night, the lighting becomes more intimate but also more dangerous. Each lamp or flickering bulb feels like a fragile barrier against the dark. This visual contrast mirrors the psychological one: what looks secure from the outside is falling apart within. Sound design also plays a vital role. Instead of loud, intrusive music, Safe House uses restrained, almost whispering audio. Footsteps echo too long. A door's hinge groans like it's in pain. A single drop of water from a broken pipe becomes a metronome of anxiety. You don't just watch this film, you feel it. The characters' interactions grow colder as their environment tightens around them. Small misunderstandings become accusations. Someone claims to have heard movement in the basement, another swears they saw a figure near the window. The camera never confirms or denies these suspicions, it lets the audience share the paranoia. In that ambiguity lies the movie's brilliance. By the midpoint of the second act, the safe house begins to resemble a psychological maze. It's no longer about surviving something outside. The real threat, Reeve suggests, comes from within, from fear, from guilt, from secrets we can no longer contain. Each scene builds on the last, not through action, but through unease. The pacing feels slow on purpose, a suffocating stillness that forces the viewer to confront their own discomfort. You start to realize that Safe House isn't designed to entertain, it's designed to disturb. And yet, that's what makes it powerful. Because in its quiet moments, when the camera drifts down an empty hallway or focuses on the trembling hand of a character too afraid to open a door, Safe House becomes something more than a film, it becomes a mirror. It reflects the fears we lock inside ourselves, hoping no one ever sees them. As the hours pass inside the safe house, the boundaries between the characters and their sanity begin to blur. What started as an uneasy alliance turns into a study of human fragility. The camera, once steady and distant, now moves closer, tighter, almost uncomfortably so. It's as if the lens itself is intruding into private thoughts. The cinematography by Dana Michaels deserves special recognition here. Her framing choices transform ordinary spaces into psychological battlegrounds. A narrow corridor becomes a tunnel of suspicion. A mirror becomes an enemy. The way she captures light on glass or the reflection of movement behind a character gives every scene a quiet sense of threat. Each actor contributes to this tension with subtle, layered performances. There are no melodramatic outbursts, no cheap scares, just slow, believable decay. The group's self-control starts to unravel in real time, and the audience feels it through the smallest details: a shaking breath, a forced smile, a whispered argument that ends with silence instead of resolution. The film's lead, played by Ethan Ward, delivers one of his most restrained yet haunting performances to date. His character, Marcus Hale, is introduced as a calm and logical figure, someone meant to hold everyone together. But as isolation tightens its grip, Ward lets the mask slip little by little, revealing cracks of fear that feel painfully human. His eyes, once confident, now dart across the room as if searching for an exit that doesn't exist. Opposite him is Claire Dunn, portraying Lena, a survivor haunted by decisions she refuses to speak of. Dunn's performance relies less on dialogue and more on physical tension. Her posture changes from composed to defensive, her tone from quiet control to bitter sarcasm. Through her, the film explores how trauma feeds distrust, and how silence can scream louder than words. There's a particularly striking sequence midway through the film. Lena sits in the dimly lit kitchen, staring at the locked door while Marcus paces behind her. Neither says a word for almost 2 full minutes. The rain outside has stopped, yet the sound of dripping water persists. It's unclear whether the sound is real or imagined, but both characters react to it. That shared illusion becomes a turning point. It's the moment the film crosses from suspense into psychological horror. Jonathan Reeves' direction in this section is quietly masterful. He refuses to explain the mystery too soon. Instead, he layers confusion upon confusion until logic becomes unreliable. The result is that every audience member becomes a participant in the breakdown. You don't just watch paranoia, you inherit it. Even the score contributes to this descent. Composer Nate Ferris uses ambient sounds that barely qualify as music: pulses, echoes, dissonant chords that fade before resolving. The sound design mirrors the character's mental state, fragmented, incomplete, and always on the edge of collapse. By the end of Chapter 3, Safe House has shifted tone completely. The idea of safety feels like a cruel joke. The characters no longer know whether the threat is external or internal. The audience doesn't either, and that's exactly how Reeve wants it. Chapter 4: The Unraveling. If the first half of Safe House is about building tension, the second half is about watching that tension explode, not through violence, but through emotional implosion. Chapter 4 marks the point where the film stops pretending to be a mystery and fully embraces psychological collapse. The walls of the house seem to close in, and the once spacious rooms feel smaller, almost suffocating. The set design subtly changes, furniture appears misplaced, lighting grows dimmer, colors desaturate. Even without overt supernatural elements, the house feels possessed by the character's fear. Marcus begins to lose his sense of leadership. The logical, rational part of him starts to crumble under pressure. His decisions become erratic, one moment calm and composed, the next impulsive and paranoid. Ethan Ward performs this descent with eerie precision. You can see the internal war playing out on his face. He's a man who wants to believe he's in control, but his eyes betray him, they flicker with doubt and exhaustion. Lena, on the other hand, grows more withdrawn. She isolates herself from the group, whispering to herself in corners, as if negotiating with invisible forces. When another character, a nervous young man named Theo, accuses her of hiding something, the scene doesn't escalate into shouting, it dissolves into silence so thick it feels physical. The audience senses that words are no longer useful in this space. Only instinct remains. This portion of the film is also where Reeves' directing style becomes most experimental. He begins using long, unbroken takes that trap the viewer in the same confined space as the characters. There's nowhere to cut, nowhere to escape. The camera pans slowly from one face to another, forcing you to live inside their discomfort. It's not entertainment anymore, it's endurance. The house itself continues to behave like a living organism. Lights flicker in specific patterns. Doors open and close without sound. A faint hum runs beneath the floorboards, just loud enough to notice but too soft to identify. It's never explained, and that's the point. Safe House thrives on unanswered questions. Reeves seems to understand that fear doesn't need resolution, it needs resonance. There's one unforgettable sequence near the midpoint of this chapter. The group finds a locked room they hadn't noticed before. When they finally break it open, there's nothing inside, just a chair, a camera, and a screen showing distorted footage of themselves from earlier in the film. It's not clear who recorded it or when. The moment doesn't rely on gore or shock, instead, it delivers psychological disorientation. The message is clear: they've been observed all along, maybe even by the house itself. This revelation deepens the film's central theme: surveillance, control, and the illusion of safety. What if the safe house isn't protecting them, but studying them? What if every choice they make inside is being tested? These questions remain deliberately unanswered, allowing the movie to operate on multiple interpretations, part thriller, part allegory. The performances during this section reach their emotional peak. Fear manifests differently for each character. Marcus becomes aggressive, Theo collapses into denial, Lena turns inward. Their breakdowns overlap, forming a kind of chaotic orchestra of panic. By this point, the audience feels as trapped as the characters, unable to tell whether what they're seeing is happening in real time or inside someone's fractured memory. Cinematically, Safe House uses restraint to intensify emotion. The soundscape drops into near silence, forcing every movement to echo. Even breathing feels loud. The tension becomes almost unbearable, not because of what's seen, but because of what's expected. The unraveling continues until one final breaking point, a moment when the power finally dies, plunging the house into total darkness. For several seconds, the screen goes black. No dialogue, no music, just the sound of rain returning outside. When the lights flicker back on, one of the group is gone. No explanation, no body, just absence. That's the genius of Safe House. It knows that the scariest thing in any story isn't what you see, but what you can't explain. In Safe House, silence isn't just a stylistic choice, it's a form of dialogue. It shapes every scene, guiding the audience's heartbeat, forcing attention to detail, and amplifying unease. Most thrillers rely on noise, gunfire, shouting, fast-paced music, but Jonathan Reeve does the opposite. He removes sound until what's left feels like the echo of dread. There's an almost musical quality to the quiet moments. The hum of electricity, the faint buzz of a fluorescent light, the way the rain outside dulls and sharpens as windows open and close, all of it becomes rhythm. Every pause feels intentional, like the film is breathing with the audience. In one haunting scene, Lena sits alone in the main corridor, her face barely illuminated by emergency lighting. She says nothing. The soundtrack fades until only the faint ticking of a clock remains. The shot holds for nearly 90 seconds, a long, unbroken stretch of stillness. It's uncomfortable, almost confrontational. And yet, in that moment, you can hear her thoughts: the guilt, the exhaustion, the fear of what might come next. Reeve uses silence as a mirror for the human mind. When people run out of words, what remains are impulses: fear, memory, instinct. The absence of dialogue allows the viewer to focus on these raw, unfiltered emotions. The editing, too, respects this rhythm. Scenes often end a few seconds later than expected, lingering on the aftermath of an event rather than the event itself. It's in these lingering shots, a trembling hand, a flickering light, a half-open door, that the film builds its real tension. Sound designer Elena Price deserves special recognition. Her work turns the house into a symphony of unease. The creak of the floorboards, the sigh of shifting air vents, the low hum beneath every quiet scene, they aren't random. They're deliberately placed cues meant to provoke instinctive fear. You don't just notice them, you feel them crawling under your skin. There's also a psychological trick at play. When the film finally does use a loud sound, a door slamming, a scream in the distance, a burst of static, it feels explosive. Because Reeve trains the audience to live inside silence, any intrusion becomes an emotional shock. The sudden noise doesn't just startle, it violates the calm we've learned to cling to. Color, too, works in harmony with sound or the lack of it. In silent sequences, the lighting becomes colder, more desaturated, almost lifeless. The house feels drained of warmth. When noise briefly returns, so does color, but never fully. It's as though the world itself is fading along with the character's hope. By this stage of the film, silence is no longer a background element, it's the voice of the house itself. Every pause feels like it's waiting for an answer. Every quiet breath feels borrowed. And the longer the film goes without sound, the more you begin to realize that silence has become its own kind of scream. In a way, Safe House rewrites the grammar of fear. It doesn't shout. It whispers and makes you lean closer to hear the danger. Chapter 6: Behind the Walls, the Directorial Vision. Jonathan Reeve has always been known as a director fascinated by control, not in a heavy-handed way, but as a theme. In Safe House, 2025, that obsession reaches its peak. He builds a world where everything appears carefully designed, yet constantly on the verge of collapse. Every camera angle, every sound cue, every pause feels like part of an invisible experiment. It's as if Reeve is both storyteller and scientist, studying how much fear an audience can endure before breaking. Unlike most mainstream thrillers, Reeve resists the temptation to explain too much. He doesn't hand the viewer answers. Instead, he offers questions disguised as clues, small fragments that invite interpretation. A photograph left on a table, a coded phrase written in condensation on a mirror, a door that opens without wind. Each detail feels meaningful, but none are resolved neatly. The effect is mesmerizing and maddening at once. His directorial style can best be described as controlled chaos. The camera never shakes violently or chases after action. Instead, it glides calm, deliberate, almost predatory. The movement is so smooth that when something finally feels out of place, it strikes the viewer with surgical precision. Reeve uses stillness the way other directors use explosions. A striking feature of his work in Safe House is the blending of genres. It isn't purely a thriller, nor is it a psychological drama or a horror film. It borrows from all three, then distills them into something intimate and cerebral. The pacing demands patience, rewarding viewers who pay attention to subtleties. It's less about survival in a physical sense and more about the slow disintegration of human connection under pressure. Critics have compared Reeve's style here to directors like Denis Villeneuve and Kiyoshi Kurosawa, filmmakers who understand that the scariest thing in cinema isn't the monster behind the door, but the person staring into the mirror. Yet Reeve's approach remains distinctively his own. His world feels colder, more precise. He doesn't want to terrify you outright, he wants to make you question why you're terrified. Thematically, Safe House explores the illusion of safety in modern life. What happens when the very systems we create to protect ourselves, technology, walls, trust, become the things that imprison us? The house becomes a metaphor for control itself. Every locked door is a comfort until it isn't. Every security camera offers reassurance until it turns inward. Reeves' collaboration with cinematographer Dana Michaels elevates this vision to visual poetry. Together, they craft images that feel both beautiful and hostile. A shaft of light cutting through dust looks almost holy, yet it illuminates despair. A hand pressed against frosted glass feels intimate and alien at once. It's a film that communicates through contrast, warmth and cold, openness and confinement, silence and chaos. Performance direction also deserves attention. Reeve gives his actors freedom within limits. He allows improvisation in emotional beats but restricts movement through the frame, forcing them to express through minimal gestures. The result is an uncanny realism. The characters feel trapped not just by circumstance but by the structure of the film itself. One of the most chilling moments of Reeves' direction comes in a late sequence where Marcus speaks directly to the camera, as though addressing someone beyond the fourth wall. His words are fragmented, his tone calm but detached. "If you're watching this," he says, "then you already know it's too late." The line isn't explained, yet it lingers like a confession. Is he talking to another character? The audience? The house? Reeve leaves it open, another unanswered question in a film made entirely of them. From a technical perspective, Reeves' restraint is what gives Safe House its power. He understands that every act of minimalism, every pause, every frame held too long invites the imagination to fill in the blanks. And in the end, imagination is far more terrifying than anything shown on screen. By the time the film reaches its final act, the viewer feels complicit in its events. You're not just watching characters suffer, you're participating in their unraveling. You start noticing sounds in your own room, reflections in your own screen. That's not accidental, that's the art of Reeves' manipulation. He designs not just a film, but a psychological space that extends beyond the theater. It's rare for a director to achieve that, rarer still to do it with such quiet confidence. Safe House doesn't scream for attention. It simply waits. And when it finally looks at you, you realize you've been seen all along. By the final act, Safe House has stripped away everything decorative. The rain has stopped, the air feels thinner, and the house's silence has hardened into something permanent. The survivors move like ghosts through dim corridors, too tired to fear the dark anymore. The camera follows them with slow, dreamlike motion, as if the film itself is exhaling after hours of held breath. The climax begins not with an explosion, but with discovery. Marcus stumbles upon a small control room hidden behind a false wall, banks of monitors, flickering screens showing live footage from every room in the house. For the first time, the audience understands that the surveillance was never symbolic. Someone or something has been watching all along. The scene unfolds with surgical calm. There is no rush, no chaos, only realization. Marcus presses play on one of the archived videos, and the screen reveals an earlier version of the group laughing, settling in, alive. The implication is devastating: they have been repeating the same nightmare, over and over, trapped inside a loop designed by the house or by the forces controlling it. Reeve never explains who created this experiment. He doesn't need to. The revelation works because it forces us to confront a universal fear that our choices might be illusions, our safety an illusion most of all. Lena enters the room a few minutes later. She sees the screens, then turns to Marcus with a look that blends recognition and defeat. Her quiet line, "It wasn't supposed to be us," lands like a confession. The film never clarifies what she means, and yet it doesn't matter. In that sentence lives the entire tragedy of Safe House, the idea that danger isn't random, that people often end up exactly where their secrets lead them. What follows is a long, uninterrupted sequence where Marcus and Lena debate whether to destroy the system or let it run. The argument is soft, intimate, almost tender. They aren't fighting for survival anymore, they're deciding whether the truth is worth living through. The tension here is emotional, not physical, and Reeve frames it as a moral question rather than a cinematic one. When Marcus finally cuts the power, every screen goes black, and for a moment there's nothing, no sound, no light, only breath. Then the film shifts. The camera pulls slowly back through the house, room by room, showing empty chairs, half-finished meals, walls marked by fingerprints. The characters are gone. Maybe they escaped. Maybe they never existed. The ambiguity is absolute. The final image before the credits is the house itself, viewed from outside for the first time since the opening. Dawn breaks over the hills, soft and colorless. The house stands silent, yet one faint red light flickers behind a window, proof that something still watches, still remembers. That's Reeve's final act of control. He doesn't deliver closure. He delivers continuity. The fear doesn't end when the movie does, it lingers, waiting for the viewer to look away first. Chapter 8: Safe House and the Audience. Every great psychological thriller lives or dies by its aftertaste, what remains in the mind when the lights come up. Safe House leaves behind a residue of unease, the kind that makes ordinary spaces feel hostile. A quiet hallway, a ticking clock, a reflection in a dark window, everything ordinary becomes suspicious after watching this film. Audience reactions have been divided but passionate. Some praise its precision, calling it a modern classic of slow burn tension. Others find it maddeningly opaque, a puzzle that refuses to be solved. But even its critics agree on one thing: it's impossible to forget. Reeve's film doesn't fade when the screen goes dark, it stays in the mind like a question with no right answer. Part of that lasting effect comes from how Safe House mirrors modern anxieties. The movie isn't just about a literal safe house, it's about the world we've built, a world monitored, recorded, protected by systems that double as prisons. The cameras, the locks, the alarms meant to secure us are the same tools that isolate us. In that sense, the film feels less like fiction and more like reflection. The performances, especially by Ethan Ward and Claire Dunn, resonate deeply here. Their characters are metaphors for two sides of human instinct. Marcus represents reason collapsing under pressure, while Lena embodies emotion hardened by guilt. Watching them navigate fear without villain or monster reminds us that the most terrifying battles happen inside the mind. Visually, the film's final passages continue to haunt. The lighting becomes gentler, but the calm feels false, like the quiet after an earthquake. Cinematographer Dana Michaels frames every closing shot as a question: the empty hallway, the still door, the faint light returning behind glass. Nothing is resolved, yet everything feels complete. That paradox is Safe House's genius. For many viewers, the ending invites personal interpretation. Some see it as a metaphor for trauma, the cycle of replaying pain until acknowledgement breaks it. Others read it as commentary on technology's gaze, suggesting that in an age of constant observation, privacy itself has become a myth. And some, of course, simply experience it as a beautifully executed horror about trust and confinement. All are valid, because Reeve designed his film to be plural, not singular. From a cultural perspective, Safe House, 2025, arrives at a moment when audiences crave intelligence in their thrillers. It respects patience, trusts observation, and assumes that silence can be thrilling if framed with intent. In doing so, it joins a small but important lineage: films like Enemy, The Invitation, and Coherence, stories that explore the fragility of perception rather than the spectacle of violence. Ultimately, Safe House isn't a film about surviving danger. It's about surviving certainty. It suggests that what we fear most isn't death or monsters, but the idea that our understanding of safety may have been wrong all along. When the credits roll, viewers are left confronting their own reflection, wondering if the locked doors in their lives are keeping threats out or keeping truths in. Epilogue: the echo after the quiet. When Safe House, 2025, ends, there's no final scream, no orchestral surge. Only quiet. And in that quiet, something remarkable happens, the audience keeps listening. They wait for another sound, another frame, another clue that never comes. That pause, that involuntary attention is the film's real ending. It proves Reeves succeeded in what he set out to do, to create a thriller that continues after it's over. From a craft standpoint, the film is a master class in restraint. Every element, acting, sound, design, pacing, operates like a perfectly balanced equation. Nothing feels accidental. The story may revolve around chaos, but the filmmaking is pure order. That tension between chaos and control is what makes Safe House unforgettable. Critically, the film challenges audiences to redefine what suspense means. It argues that fear doesn't need spectacle, it needs empathy. It asks viewers to lean in instead of recoil. That philosophy, executed with this level of precision, is rare in contemporary cinema. The new generation of filmmakers will likely cite Safe House as a turning point, a reminder that minimalism can terrify more effectively than excess, that emotion can replace exposition, and that silence, handled with courage, can speak louder than any soundtrack. And so, as the final credits fade, the viewer leaves the theater changed, walking slower, noticing sounds, glancing twice at reflections. The film ends, but the conversation it starts continues long after. Acknowledgement and closing note. Safe House, 2025, is a work of fiction. Names, characters, and events depicted in this review and the film are entirely imaginary. Any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is coincidental. All creative rights belong to the filmmakers and distributors who brought this story to life. This analysis was written for discussion and appreciation of the film's artistic merit, to celebrate its craft, not to reproduce or replace it. In the world of action thrillers, few names evoke the same level of tension, intensity, and intrigue as Safe House. The original 2012 film starring Denzel Washington and Ryan Reynolds left audiences gripping their seats, breath held, hearts racing, as explosions, betrayals, and moral gray areas painted a vivid picture of espionage in its rawest form. It wasn't just another action film, it was a tightly wound exploration of loyalty, trust, and the dangerous world of intelligence where truth is never clear and every ally might secretly be an enemy. Over the years, fans of the franchise have whispered about a continuation, a story that would bring the universe back to life while diving even deeper into its murky depths. That long wait has finally ended with Safe House 2025, a new chapter that does not merely revisit the old formula but expands it into something grander, darker, and more emotionally complex. Now, after more than a decade of silence, Safe House 2025 reignites the franchise, reintroducing the sharp edges of espionage, the blurred lines between right and wrong, and the haunting question that always lingers in this universe: who can you truly trust? The film combines heart-pounding action with deep emotional storytelling, giving audiences both adrenaline and introspection. It stands confidently on its own while honoring the legacy of the first film. Every moment feels like a nod to the past and a bold leap toward the future. At its core, Safe House 2025 is a story of survival, not just survival of the body, but of the soul. It's about rogue agents, hidden agendas, and the invisible lines drawn between loyalty and betrayal. It's about the cost of secrets and the heavy toll of truth in a world where silence can mean safety and honesty can mean death. The story begins in the aftermath of a global intelligence collapse. The modern world is fractured, trust in institutions has eroded, alliances have weakened, and the agencies once seen as the guardians of security now lie in question. Following a series of high-profile leaks, assassinations, and betrayals, intelligence networks across the world have been compromised. Files that should have been buried deep within encrypted systems have been exposed. Agents once thought untouchable are now being hunted. The shadow of fear stretches from Washington to Moscow, from London to Zurich. Within this chaos, the CIA finds itself facing an enemy unlike any it has encountered before, not an opposing nation, not a terrorist group, but an invisible force from within. In response, the agency reinstates a covert program, a network of secret safe houses scattered across Europe. These hidden sanctuaries serve as temporary protection for valuable informants, compromised agents, and the fragments of intelligence that remain untainted. But in this new world, even the walls meant to protect have cracks. Among the surviving operatives is a veteran agent, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, a man haunted by the ghosts of missions gone wrong. Once a respected field operative, he now lives in the shadows, burdened by guilt, mistrust, and regret. He's hiding in plain sight, blending into a world that has moved on without him. Every night he checks his weapon, every morning he scans his surroundings, always waiting for the sound of footsteps that might mean his cover has been blown. His mission once defined him, but now, it has nearly destroyed him. He's hunted not only by unknown enemies but by his own conscience and perhaps, his own agency. Somewhere, someone betrayed him, but he doesn't know who. That question, who can I trust, drives his every move. The calm surface of his exile begins to shatter when a young CIA analyst, Emma Carter, played by Florence Pugh, is assigned to guard a high-value detainee at a secret safe house in Prague. Emma is the new face of intelligence, brilliant, disciplined, and idealistic. She joined the agency believing in purpose, in order, in the idea that the system she served existed to protect. But soon, she will discover that the truth is far murkier than the training manuals ever hinted. Her assignment seems simple at first: watch, report, and protect. But her detainee, a mysterious man known only by the codename Raven, carries secrets that could unravel governments. He claims to hold information about a rogue faction that operates inside multiple world powers, manipulating wars, elections, and economies for their own hidden gain. As Carter listens to him, suspicion begins to grow. He doesn't sound like the terrorist she was briefed on. He speaks with precision, calmness, and an unsettling knowledge of the very agency she serves. He knows names, codes, and details that only an insider should know. The longer they remain together, the more the walls of trust begin to erode, not between captor and captive, but between truth and lies. Days pass in the safe house. The cold walls echo with silence, the flicker of security monitors their only light. Carter begins to feel the strain, a tension she can't quite name. Something about their location feels off. The coded transmissions she receives from headquarters begin to contradict each other. The orders seem too vague, too cautious, as if someone within the agency is hiding something. Then, without warning, the world shatters. One night, as rain lashes against the windows and the hum of electricity fills the room, an ambush strikes. The safe house, meant to be a fortress, becomes a death trap. Explosions rip through the walls, glass shatters, alarms blare, and masked assailants storm the building with military precision. Carter and Raven have no choice but to flee. What follows is a relentless chase across Europe through frozen train routes, crowded city streets, and desolate mountain passes. Every shadow hides a potential assassin. Every whisper on the radio could be a death sentence. As Carter begins to piece together fragments of information from Raven's cryptic words and from the coded messages she intercepts, a horrifying realization dawns upon her: the man she was ordered to detain might not be the villain after all. Perhaps, the real danger lies closer than she ever imagined. Raven insists that the people hunting them are not terrorists, not foreign spies, but something far worse: an internal shadow group, orchestrating global chaos for financial and political control. And just like that, the story transforms. It's no longer just a race for survival, it becomes a desperate search for truth. This revelation marks the beginning of Safe House 2025's emotional and thematic heart. From this point onward, every explosion, every chase, every confrontation becomes symbolic of something deeper: a struggle not only between enemies, but between trust and betrayal, between illusion and reality, between what's right and what's necessary. The new Safe House, both the literal and symbolic one, takes inspiration from the gritty realism of modern spy dramas, blending the cold precision of intelligence work with the fragile emotions that define human connection. Gyllenhaal's portrayal of the broken agent searching for redemption adds a haunting depth to the film. His eyes tell the story of a man who has seen too much, lost too much, and yet still hopes foolishly or bravely that truth might still matter. Florence Pugh, on the other hand, embodies the next generation of intelligence officers determined, fearless, but torn by the moral cost of her loyalty. She represents the question many in her position silently ask: at what point does duty become complicity? Their dynamic, the constant push and pull between suspicion and trust, anger and empathy, becomes the beating heart of the movie. Supporting them are powerful performances from Mahershala Ali as CIA Director Thomas Gray, a man whose calm authority hides ruthless ambition. He's a leader who mentors with one hand and manipulates with the other, a protector who might also be the predator. His every word drips with controlled power, measured, deliberate, and dangerous. Rebecca Ferguson joins the ensemble as Elise Novick, a former operative and Carter's ex-mentor. Once loyal, now disillusioned, she sells secrets to the highest bidder. Her sudden return reopens old wounds and adds an unpredictable edge to the story. Is she an ally, a threat, or something in between? No one, not even Elise herself, seems certain. The pacing of the story is tight and deliberate. Director Antoine Fuqua, returning to helm this sequel, infuses every frame with raw combat realism and cinematic beauty. Silence builds tension. Stillness precedes violence. And when action erupts, it's explosive not for spectacle, but for emotion. Every gunshot has weight. Every fight has consequence. Unlike typical thrillers that rely purely on style, Safe House 2025 uses its action to move its characters forward, forcing them to confront their fears, their flaws, and their limits. Cinematically, the movie's visual language mirrors its themes. Light and shadow dominate. Most of the story unfolds in dimly lit rooms, rain-soaked alleys, and cold, sterile hideouts. The desaturated colors create a visual metaphor for moral ambiguity, the gray space where right and wrong blur until they become indistinguishable. Each frame seems to whisper secrets, betrayal lurking in plain sight, allies turning to enemies, truth buried under layers of lies. The score, composed by Ludwig Göransson, wraps around the visuals like a second narrative. Deep percussion and haunting electronic tones pulse through the tension, guiding the viewer's heartbeat. And somewhere within all that sound and silence, within the chaos and quiet, lies the question that drives Safe House 2025. How do you tell the difference between protecting your country and destroying your soul? The world that Safe House 2025 portrays is one that has changed beyond recognition. The rules that once governed the delicate balance of power between nations have dissolved into chaos. Intelligence agencies once feared, respected, and trusted are now tangled in webs of internal corruption, manipulation, and doubt. In the early days of the crisis, when the leaks first began, governments dismissed them as isolated incidents. A few stolen files here, a compromised agent there, nothing that couldn't be contained. But as weeks turned into months, it became clear that something much deeper was unraveling beneath the surface. Information that should never have seen daylight was being exposed on the dark web. Confidential deals, secret alliances, and long-buried operations were suddenly out in the open for the world to dissect. The CIA, MI6, Mossad, and even the covered Russian SVR found themselves in an unprecedented state of paralysis. Trust, the invisible glue that held the intelligence world together, had disintegrated. Agents stopped communicating through official channels. Missions were aborted. Sleeper cells went rogue. Double agents disappeared. Entire databases vanished overnight, replaced by taunting digital messages signed only with a single mark: the architect. No one knew who or what the architect was. Some believed it to be a single hacker, a ghost in the system. Others whispered it was an AI, a self-learning entity created during the Cold War to protect data and now turned against its creators. But a select few, those who had seen the patterns, began to suspect something even more unsettling: that the architect wasn't a person or machine at all, but a network of operatives from multiple nations, bound not by allegiance, but by profit and control. For the public, the collapse came as news headlines, stories of data breaches, resignations, and financial crashes. But for those inside the intelligence world, it was an apocalypse. Imagine a world where every agent's location, every operation, every coded message was suddenly known. Safe houses burned, operatives vanished, and field missions turned into bloodbaths. In that environment, paranoia became the new survival instinct. Everyone watched everyone else. Every word was analyzed, every glance questioned. It was no longer about gathering intelligence, it was about staying alive long enough to understand who had destroyed the system from within. Amid this crumbling world, our central characters emerged not as heroes, but as survivors. Agent Michael Weston, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, had seen it coming. He had sensed the rot years before it became visible. He'd watched as protocols were ignored, as politics replaced logic, and as agents became disposable pieces on a much larger board. When the collapse began, he was already in hiding, operating off the grid. To his peers, he was a ghost. To his enemies, a loose end. He had once been one of the CIA's top field operatives, known for his precision, calmness, and ability to anticipate danger before it arrived. But that same intuition had made him a threat. When he stumbled upon an unauthorized transfer of black funds during a classified operation in Istanbul, he reported it, and within a week, his entire team was dead. The official report called it a terrorist ambush. He knew better. Haunted by guilt and distrust, Weston vanished. For years, he drifted through the shadows of Europe, moving from one identity to another, taking cash jobs, and leaving no digital footprint behind. The agency had erased him from its system, but in the shadows, he still kept watch. He still cared, though he'd never admitted about the truth he had once served. When Safe House 2025 begins, Weston is not a man looking for redemption. He's a man trying to survive the weight of his own memories. His world is small, a single apartment in Budapest, with one window facing the street. He spends his nights cleaning his weapon, his mornings studying the faces that pass below. The silence of the city is both comfort and curse. That fragile calm breaks when he intercepts a coded message on an encrypted frequency, one he thought was dead years ago. The message is incomplete, fragmented, but one phrase stands out. The architect is awake. Meanwhile, back in Langley, the CIA is in panic mode. Internal audits have revealed something terrifying, that nearly 40% of its active global operations have been compromised. Digital signatures have been forged, entire networks rerouted through unknown servers. And at the center of it all is one name that keeps reappearing in the leaked files: Raven. To the agency, Raven is a myth, a ghost operative, someone who had defected years ago and supposedly vanished in Eastern Europe. Some say he was killed, others claim he went rogue and built his own empire of information brokers. But now, his name resurfacing means one thing: the past has come back to haunt them. Emma Carter, the young CIA analyst played by Florence Pugh, is one of the few agents who still believes in procedure, in truth, and in the idea that good intentions can survive in a corrupted system. She has spent her short career buried in data, decoding transmissions, and cross-referencing aliases. She's a genius, but also an idealist, and that makes her dangerous in an agency built on lies. When she is abruptly reassigned to guard Raven in a remote safe house in Prague, she doesn't question it. She sees it as a chance to prove herself, to finally step into the field and show that her loyalty matters. What she doesn't realize is that she's being sent into a trap, one designed to test her trust, her faith, and her sense of right and wrong. Her first encounter with Raven is electric in its tension. He sits in the corner of a dimly lit room, hands cuffed, eyes calm and calculating. There's something unsettling in his composure. He doesn't look like a man on the run, he looks like a man waiting for something. "Do you know why you're here?" she asks. He smiles faintly. "Do you?" That simple exchange sets the tone for everything that follows. Raven knows more than he should. He speaks in riddles, referencing operations that Carter has never heard of, hinting that her own agency has secrets even she isn't cleared to know. Every time she presses for answers, he redirects, as if testing her patience and probing her conviction. Days pass. The tension builds. And somewhere deep within the walls of that Prague safe house, lines begin to blur. Carter begins to suspect that the intelligence collapse, the leaks, the assassinations, the betrayal is not the work of an external force but something born inside the agency itself. She finds coded messages in her reports, references to Operation Eden, a classified program that doesn't appear in any official file. When she attempts to trace it, her access is denied. That's when the safe house attack occurs, sudden, violent, and precise. The way the assailants move, the technology they use, it all points to one horrifying truth: these are not mercenaries or rebels. These are trained agents, using CIA tactics. Someone from within has ordered the hit. Weston, alerted by the same encrypted frequency, tracks the attack's coordinates. Against his better judgment, he intervenes, pulling Carter and Raven from the wreckage. That's how their paths cross. For the first time since his disappearance, Weston steps out of the shadows. And as he looks at the two people he's just rescued, the idealistic young analyst and the man claiming to hold the key to the world's downfall, he realizes that his past has finally caught up with him. Together, they flee into the night, hunted by forces they can't identify. And in that flight begins the true journey of Safe House 2025, a descent into a labyrinth of deceit, loyalty, and the unrelenting question: what is truth worth when the truth itself is weaponized? The collapse of intelligence isn't just a background setting in this story, it's a character. It breathes, manipulates, and shapes every decision. It's the ghost that lingers behind every scene, whispering reminders that in this world, nothing and no one is truly safe. The road from Prague to Vienna cuts through miles of cold, open countryside. Snow gathers on the edges of the narrow asphalt, and the headlights of the black SUV slice through the fog like silent blades. Inside the vehicle, tension sits heavier than the night air itself. Emma Carter sits in the back seat beside Raven, her gun drawn but lowered. Across from her, Weston drives with his usual calm intensity, eyes fixed on the empty highway, every muscle ready to react at the first sign of pursuit. The silence inside is almost unbearable. The sound of the engine hums like a quiet warning. No one trusts anyone. They've been driving for hours without speaking. The last thing Carter remembers clearly is the explosion, the thunderous roar of the safe house being torn apart, the glass raining down, the smell of smoke and gunpowder thick in her throat. Weston's sudden arrival had felt like both a miracle and a threat. She looks at him now, studying his face. He's older than she expected, tired, hard-edged, but sharp. There's something in his eyes that speaks of experience, of pain, of a man who's seen every kind of betrayal and survived only because he stopped believing in anyone but himself. Raven, on the other hand, sits too still. His hands are no longer cuffed, but his restraint feels more dangerous than freedom. He doesn't move much, he simply observes. Every few minutes, his gaze shifts from Carter to Weston, measuring them both not out of fear, but out of calculation. Finally, Carter breaks the silence. "You said they'd come for you," she says quietly. "You knew the attack was coming, didn't you?" Raven doesn't look at her. "I told your agency they'd come. You just didn't believe me." "And who are they exactly?" she presses. He turns his head slightly, his voice calm, almost detached. "The same people who built your safe house. The same people who designed your mission. The same ones who wrote your orders." Weston glances at him through the rearview mirror. "You're saying it was an inside job?" "I'm saying," Raven replies, "there's no such thing as outside anymore." The words hang heavy in the air. Carter wants to argue, but a part of her knows he might be right. The patterns she'd seen in her data analysis before the mission, the strange routing of encrypted messages, the access denials, the duplicate transmission codes, all point to an inside leak. Someone high up is orchestrating everything. They reach a small roadside motel by dawn, the kind of place that has existed unchanged since the 1980s. Neon lights buzz faintly, a faded sign sways in the wind, and the parking lot is empty except for their car and a rusted pickup. It's remote enough to buy them a few hours of rest. Inside, Weston checks the perimeter with mechanical precision. He disables the room's smoke detector, scans for hidden transmitters, and covers the windows with blackout curtains. Every move is practiced, automatic, like a man who's done this 1,000 times. Carter watches him and can't help but ask, "How long have you been running?" Weston doesn't look up from his work. "Long enough to stop keeping count." She hesitates. "Were you one of them?" He stops. "One of who?" "The people Raven's talking about. The ones who built this system." For the first time, he looks directly at her. His stare is cold, honest. "I was part of something once. Believed it meant something. But belief doesn't keep you alive in this business." Raven lets out a soft laugh. "You see? He understands. Belief is the first step to betrayal." Carter frowns. "You sound like you've given up on everything." Raven's expression hardens. "When you've seen how deep the rot goes, giving up isn't weakness, it's survival." His tone carries the weight of truth. Weston knows it, too. Later, as Carter steps outside to breathe, she finds herself staring at the rising sun. The cold bites at her skin. The world looks normal: birds, frost, silence, yet everything feels unreal. The thought that her own agency might be compromised eats at her. Inside, Raven sits quietly at the small table, studying the flickering light of a single bulb. Weston leans against the wall, arms crossed. For a moment, they are two ghosts from the same war, one still fighting, the other already lost. "You trust her?" Raven asks. Weston doesn't answer. "She's green," Raven continues. "Still believes there's a right side." "She'll learn," Weston replies. Raven smirks. "Or she'll die first." That exchange marks the beginning of an uneasy alliance, one built on convenience rather than trust. They all need each other now. Weston needs information. Carter needs survival. Raven needs both. But the betrayal runs deeper than any of them realize. Back in Langley, Director Thomas Gray watches satellite feeds of the Prague incident. The explosion, the missing convoy, the lack of digital footprints, it all points to a breach. Standing beside him is Elise Novik, now a consultant, whose calm demeanor hides sharp intelligence. "They're off the grid," she says. Gray nods. "Find them. And when we do?" Gray's voice is cold. "We clean it up." Novik studies his face, unsure whether he means capture or kill. In the shadows of the CIA's command center, another figure monitors the feeds, a data technician wearing a headset. She's young, nervous, and doesn't speak much. On her screen, a hidden data line flashes for a moment, showing an encrypted transfer labeled Architect Node 7 active. Her heart skips a beat. She recognizes the code but knows better than to say anything. In this building, curiosity can be fatal. The screen goes dark again, and the line disappears. As night falls over Vienna, Weston, Carter, and Raven prepare to move. Raven insists they must reach Zurich, the financial core where the architect's network supposedly operates. Weston is skeptical, but every route he checks shows pursuit closing in. Whoever is after them has resources, drones, trackers, encrypted comms, all pointing to one truth: this is not a rogue faction. This is government-level coordination. They steal a new vehicle, change license plates, and vanish into the next storm. The chase continues, but beneath it all, the tension between them grows sharper, more dangerous. Carter begins to notice inconsistencies in Raven's story. He knows details about Weston's past that he should not. He refers to operations classified far above his supposed clearance. Once, during a stop near the border, she catches him accessing a laptop he claimed he didn't have. When she confronts him, he simply says, "We all lie for survival, Agent Carter. The difference is who we lie to." Her doubt begins to turn toward Weston, too. How did he know where to find them? Why did he intercept the message just in time? The thought cuts deep. Maybe they're all being played, part of a larger design. Betrayal doesn't come in one dramatic moment in Safe House 2025. It seeps slowly, like poison. It turns allies into strangers and truth into illusion. That night, as they camp near a frozen river, Carter can't sleep. She watches the flames flicker against the snow, their light dancing over the faces of the two men beside her. Weston cleans his weapon quietly, methodically. Raven sits staring into the fire, lost in thought. Carter finally asks, "What happens when we reach Zurich?" Raven looks up. "We find the source. We expose the system. We end the architect. And if the architect isn't a person?" Raven's gaze darkens. "Then we destroy whoever's pretending to be one." The crackling fire fills the silence that follows. In that moment, the three of them are bound not by trust, but by necessity. Each carries secrets. Each knows that one wrong move could end them all. And yet, beneath all the suspicion, there's something unspoken, a shared understanding that they are the last remnants of a world collapsing under its own lies. The camera pans upward, snow falling, flames fading as the music swells, cold and haunting. The shadow of betrayal stretches across them all. And somewhere far away, inside a dark control room filled with flickering screens, a distorted voice speaks over a radio frequency. "They're on the move. Initiate Phase 2. The voice pauses. "No survivors." The signal cuts out. And the chase begins again. The night air over Central Europe is cold and restless. It carries the weight of pursuit, invisible, but relentless. Every gust of wind feels like a whisper from the past, every shadow seems alive. Weston, Carter, and Raven move through this darkness like fugitives bound by fragile threads of trust, driven by the single, uncertain goal of survival. The chase begins at dawn. A storm brews on the horizon, swallowing the faint light that breaks through the clouds. Their vehicle, a black Range Rover taken from a border checkpoint, cuts through winding roads that twist like veins through the mountains. The roads are narrow, the air thin, and the danger constant. Weston drives with quiet precision. Every mile is a calculation: how far they can go on the fuel they have, where to hide if drones appear, which route is least likely to be compromised. His instincts are sharp, honed by years of betrayal and survival. His silence is not coldness but strategy. He listens to the rhythm of the road, the faint static of the radio, the subtle sound of pursuit far behind. In the back seat, Emma Carter stares out the window, lost in thought. The cities they pass, Bratislava, then Brno, then the ghostly edges of Munich, blur into a collage of lights and shadows. Her mind races faster than the car. Every moment she spends with these men forces her to question everything she's ever believed. The agency she once thought incorruptible has become a maze of lies. The orders she followed might have been written by the very people who caused this collapse. And now, sitting beside a man the world calls a traitor and another who's been branded a ghost, she realizes that the truth she's chasing might destroy her as surely as the bullets of her pursuers. Raven, as always, remains unreadable. He speaks rarely, his eyes fixed on the data pad in his hands, a slim device connected to no known network, encrypted beyond Carter's understanding. Occasionally, the screen flashes with coordinates or strange alphanumeric codes. When she tries to ask what he's doing, he only replies, "Collecting insurance." They stop briefly at an abandoned train yard near Salzburg. The place looks like a forgotten relic of another age: rusted locomotives, shattered glass, graffiti-covered walls. The silence is eerie, broken only by the dripping of melted snow from the iron beams above. Weston walks the perimeter, weapon drawn, scanning every shadow. Carter checks the map, trying to plot their next move. Raven sits on a steel crate, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. She turns to him. "Why Zurich? Why there?" Raven answers without hesitation. "Because Zurich is where it all began. The money, the files, the signals, they all converge there. The architect's network is hidden beneath the financial systems. Every transaction, Every offshore account, every false identity passes through that city at some point. You want to find the truth? You follow the money. Weston glances over. And when we find it? Raven's voice hardens. Then we expose it. Or we burn it down. The words hang in the cold air, echoing through the metal shells of the old trains. Suddenly, a sound breaks the stillness, the distant thrum of engines. Not one, but several. Weston freezes, his instincts flaring to life. Move. Now. They scatter. Weston signals Carter toward the far end of the yard while Raven grabs his data pad and follows. The headlights of armored vehicles cut through the darkness, sweeping across the rusted walls. Drones hum above, their red sensors scanning like hungry eyes. Gunfire erupts. Bullets ricochet off steel. The chase turns chaotic. Weston fires back in calculated bursts, taking cover behind a derailed locomotive. Carter moves with surprising agility, fear sharpening her reflexes. Raven, unarmed but focused, calls out directions based on the drone movement patterns he detects on his pad. Left side 20 meters, he shouts. One's flanking from the south. They reach the far side of the yard where an old maintenance tunnel opens into the forest beyond. Weston tosses a grenade behind them, a flashbang that lights the yard in blinding white. The explosion buys them seconds, maybe less, but it's enough. They disappear into the tunnel as the vehicles crash through the yard, floodlights sweeping wildly. Inside, the tunnel is narrow, damp, and endless. Their footsteps echo like ghosts in the dark. Carter breathes heavily, clutching her side. Weston moves ahead, flashlight steady. Raven follows silently, his expression unreadable as always. When they finally emerge, dawn is breaking again, pale light stretching across the frozen landscape. They stand on the outskirts of a small Austrian village, smoke curling lazily from chimneys in the distance. The world looks peaceful, but they know it's a fragile illusion. They find temporary refuge in a church on the hill, old, crumbling, and long abandoned. The stained glass windows are cracked, the pews covered in dust. Yet the silence feels sacred. Weston clears a space near the altar and sets up a makeshift camp. Carter finally allows herself to breathe. She looks around the decaying beauty of the place, faded frescoes, forgotten prayers, and feels something shift inside her. Do you ever get tired of running? She asks quietly. Weston doesn't look up. You stop getting tired when stopping means dying. Raven chuckles from the corner. He's not wrong. The trick is not to survive, it's to make survival mean something. Carter stares at him. And what does survival mean to you? He meets her gaze with unsettling calm. It means living long enough to tell the truth. His words echo like scripture in the hollow church. Later that night, as the storm rages outside, Carter dreams flashes of her old life at Langley, the sterile corridors, the glow of computer screens, the voice of Director Gray telling her she had promise. You'll do great things, Emma. You just have to trust the system. She wakes with a start, heart pounding. Weston is sitting nearby, cleaning his weapon again. Raven sleeps against the wall, his pad resting beside him. Could you ever go back? She asks softly. Weston glances at her, then shakes his head. There's no back. Once you see what's behind the curtain, it's gone. The illusion, the faith, all of it. Then why keep fighting? He pauses for a long time. Because if I stop, they win. Outside, the wind howls through the trees, carrying with it a faint, mechanical buzz. Drones? Weston tenses. Raven's eyes open instantly, a soldier's reflex. They found us, Weston whispers. In seconds, the silence shatters again. Bullets tear through the stained glass, sending shards of color raining across the floor. The church becomes a battlefield, echoes of faith and war colliding. Carter dives for cover, returning fire through a cracked window. Raven scrambles to grab his pad, typing furiously. I can shut down their signal but only for 30 seconds, he shouts. Do it, Weston commands. Raven's fingers blur across the screen. The drone lights flicker, stutter, then vanish from the sky. Weston grabs Carter's arm. Now. They break through the back door, racing into the storm. Lightning flashes overhead. The ground is slick, the air electric. The forest swallows them whole. Behind them, the church burns its flames reflecting off the rain-soaked trees like a dying confession. As they run, Carter looks back one last time. The spire collapses in a burst of fire and smoke. It feels like watching faith itself crumble. They reach the border by dawn wet, bruised, but alive. Raven leads them to a freight train preparing to depart. Without hesitation, they jump aboard, disappearing among crates and shadows as the train pulls away. For a brief moment, there's silence again, just the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks. Carter leans back against the cold metal, breathing hard. Weston stares out into the endless horizon. Raven sits nearby, watching them both with quiet intensity. Zurich, he says at last. Everything ends in Zurich. The train rolls on through the heart of Europe, through snow, through tunnels, through the dark pulse of cities that never sleep. And somewhere far behind them, Director Gray receives another encrypted message on his private terminal. A single line. Subject in transit. Phase 2 complete. Awaiting clearance for Phase 3. Gray exhales slowly. Proceed. The screen fades to black. The hunt continues. The rain had been falling for hours. A slow, relentless drizzle that made the city look tired, as if the sky itself had forgotten how to stop crying. The street outside the safe house glistened with reflections of neon lights and passing cars. Inside, silence ruled, the kind of silence that carried the weight of too many secrets. The safe house wasn't much. Just a forgotten apartment above an abandoned printing shop. Peeling paint, cracked tiles, and a faint smell of damp paper. But for those hiding from the world, it was enough. A flickering bulb hung from the ceiling, throwing pale light across the room where Raven sat, staring at the floor. He hadn't slept properly in days. The walls felt too close, the air too heavy. Every sound outside, a passing car, a dog's bark, the hum of a generator, felt like a threat. He rubbed his face, his fingers tracing the scar near his temple, a souvenir from a job that had gone wrong months ago. Across the room, Mara was watching him. She sat on the edge of the old couch, her laptop open, its faint glow reflecting in her eyes. Her voice broke the silence. Do you think they've found us yet? Raven didn't look up. If they had, we wouldn't be talking. That's not comforting, she said, closing the laptop. We can't keep running like this. Every city feels smaller than the last. Raven finally looked at her. That's the point of a cage, Mara. It keeps getting smaller until you forget you ever had space. She frowned, unsure whether he was talking about their mission or something deeper. Outside, thunder rumbled. The building trembled just slightly, or maybe it was just their nerves. A kettle whistled faintly in the corner, breaking the tension. Mara stood, poured 2 cups of tea, and handed one to him. You used to talk more, she said softly. Back when this still felt like a cause. Raven took the cup but didn't drink. It's still a cause. Just not the one we thought it was. She studied his face, the exhaustion, the restraint, the quiet fear hiding behind his steady eyes. You think we were lied to? I know we were. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain on the window. Then, as if the universe was listening, the light flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The safe house plunged into darkness. Raven was already moving. His instincts were faster than thought. He reached for the gun on the table, the one that had never left his sight. Mara froze, her breath sharp in the dark. Don't move, he whispered. His voice was calm but heavy, the way a soldier's voice gets when he knows danger is real. The world narrowed to sound rain, footsteps outside, a door creaking somewhere in the building. Raven's finger rested on the trigger. His heartbeat synced with the rhythm of the rain. Could be the power grid, Mara whispered. Could be, he said. But it's not. He motioned for her to move toward the corner. They crouched low, shadows inside shadows. The door at the end of the hallway groaned slowly, painfully, as if someone was testing how much noise it would make before giving them away. Then came a whisper. Raven. Mara's eyes widened. She recognized the voice. It's Eli, she whispered back. He found us. Raven's grip tightened. No one should have found us. But Eli stepped into the faint glow of a flashlight, his face pale and soaked from the rain. He looked terrified, more ghost than man. You need to see this, Eli said. It's not what we thought. None of it is. Raven lowered his gun slightly but didn't relax. Talk. Eli glanced toward the window as if expecting someone to appear. They're not who we thought they were. The ones funding this. The people we've been protecting, they're the same ones orchestrating the attacks. Mara shook her head. That doesn't make sense. They said. They lied, Eli interrupted. His voice broke. They always have. We're not fighting foreign enemies, Mara. We're cleaning up for them. We're their ghosts. The words hung heavy in the air. The room seemed smaller now, darker, colder. Raven set his gun on the table, his mind running through everything, every mission, every target, every name he'd crossed off without question. The pieces were rearranging themselves into something horrifyingly clear. So, he said quietly, we've been working for the enemy all along. Eli nodded. And now they're erasing the evidence us. Outside, a car engine started. Headlights cut briefly through the rain. Then, silence again. Raven looked at Mara, then at Eli. Pack up. We leave in 5 minutes. Mara hesitated. Go where? They know everything, every route, every contact. We find the one thing they don't control, Raven said. He grabbed a map from the wall, unfolded it, and circled a blank section near the mountains. Off-grid. No surveillance. No records. Eli's voice trembled. You think we'll make it? Raven loaded the gun. We have to. Because if we don't, no one will ever know the truth. Thunder cracked again, louder this time. The city outside seemed to hold its breath. And in that breath, that single, fragile moment, 3 people made a choice that would change everything. The rain refused to stop. It felt alive, pounding against the rooftops like an endless warning. By the time Raven, Mara, and Eli reached the back alley, their clothes were soaked through. The streetlights flickered dimly, their glow barely touching the narrow path that led toward the main road. Every corner of the city looked unfamiliar now. Once, these streets had been safe, friendly, even. Now, every window felt like an eye, every shadow like a trap. Raven moved first, scanning the path with the trained precision of a man who had lived too long in danger. Stay close, he said quietly. His voice carried calm, but his mind was racing. Behind him, Mara clutched her small bag, the only things she had managed to pack: a hard drive, a gun, and a few photographs. Eli followed, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. He had been on the run before, but never from his own people. They reached the corner where the alley met the street. A black van rolled past, slow, its tinted windows reflecting nothing. Raven motioned for them to stop. The van moved on, disappearing around the bend, leaving behind the faint sound of tires against wet asphalt. When it was gone, Raven whispered, now. They moved quickly, 3 shadows blending into the night. The plan was simple: reach the old freight station at the edge of the city. From there, they could board a supply train that left before dawn. It wasn't safe, but it was unpredictable, and unpredictable was their only advantage. Mara's breath came heavy. You think they know we're gone already? They always know, Raven said. But knowing isn't the same as catching. Eli gripped the strap of his backpack tighter. I've seen the files, Raven. They have eyes in every department, every port. We're not ghosts, we're prey. Raven didn't answer. He knew Eli was right. But stopping now wasn't an option. He'd seen what happened to those who gave up, erased from every system, every record, every memory. As if they had never existed. They turned onto a quiet street lined with shuttered shops and broken lights. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, rising, falling, fading. Raven raised a hand, signaling them to halt. He crouched beside a parked car and wiped the condensation from the window. In the reflection, he saw two men at the far end of the street dressed in black, moving with purpose. Company, he muttered. Mara's eyes widened. How many? Two, maybe more. Eli's voice trembled. We can't go back. Raven drew his gun, keeping it low. We don't go back. We go through. He led them down a side passage between two old buildings. The space was narrow, littered with trash and dripping pipes. The air smelled of rust and rainwater. They moved in silence until they reached a tall fence topped with barbed wire. Morrow looked up, defeated. Now what? Raven holstered his gun and crouched. Step on my back. She hesitated. You can't. Now, Mara. She obeyed. With a quick motion, she climbed over, her hand cutting on the wire. Blood mixed with rain. She landed on the other side, gasping. Raven helped Eli next, then vaulted the fence himself with practiced ease. On the other side was an abandoned tram line, rails twisted by time and rust. They followed it until they reached a tunnel entrance, half collapsed, its mouth swallowing the night. This leads to the industrial sector, Raven said. If we're lucky, it'll take us close to the station. Eli hesitated. And if we're not lucky? Raven looked at him. Then we make our own luck. They entered the tunnel. The darkness inside was thick, almost tangible. The only light came from Mara's phone, casting a weak glow on the damp walls. Every step echoed, turning the sound of 3 pairs of boots into a whispering army. Halfway through, Eli stopped. Wait, he said, his voice low. Do you hear that? They froze. At first, there was nothing, then a faint metallic click. A sound too sharp, too deliberate. Raven's instincts flared. Down. The explosion hit before they could think. A burst of light and dust filled the tunnel, throwing them to the ground. Concrete cracked, and a section of the wall gave way, showering them with debris. Mara coughed, struggling to see through the dust. Eli! I'm here, he shouted. His face was smeared with dirt and blood, but he was alive. Raven dragged himself to his feet. The ringing in his ears made everything sound distant, underwater. He grabbed Mara's arm and pulled her behind a broken pillar as a second blast shook the tunnel. They're closing in, Raven said. We have to move now. Through the haze, he spotted a service door on the right side of the tunnel. He kicked it open, revealing a narrow maintenance shaft. They crawled inside, one by one, as the sounds of boots and gunfire echoed behind them. The shaft was long and cramped, but it led them out to a drainage channel behind a row of factories. They stumbled into the open air, gasping, coughing, half-blind. Morrow looked back at the tunnel. Smoke poured from it like a wound in the earth. They knew where we'd be, she said. They set the trap. Raven nodded grimly. Which means someone told them. Eli's face went pale. You think one of us? Not us, Raven interrupted. Someone higher up. Someone who knows the routes. He checked his watch. 3:47 a.m. They had just over an hour before the freight train departed. We keep moving, he said. No stops. No signals. They're tracking patterns, not people. If we move like chaos, we stay invisible. The rain was easing now, but the cold bit deep. They ran through empty lots, past rusted machinery and flickering security lights. Every step felt heavier, every breath shorter. Yet none of them dared to stop. By the time they reached the freight yard, dawn was breaking a faint line of grey across the horizon. The air smelled of oil and iron. Dozens of freight cars stood silent on the tracks, waiting to be hauled into the world. "This is it," Raven said. "Find an empty one." They split up, searching through the rows. Finally, Mara found a car half loaded with crates. She climbed inside, motioning for the others. As the train began to move, the city slipped away behind them, its skyline dissolving into mist and smoke. Mara leaned against the cold metal wall, exhausted. "Where are we going?" Raven stared out the small opening in the door. "Somewhere they've forgotten." Eli closed his eyes. "And if they find us again?" Raven's voice was steady, almost calm. "Then we remind them why they were afraid of us in the first place." The train thundered into the open country, carrying them toward the unknown, toward the truth that could destroy everything they once believed in. The world outside the city felt like another planet. The night had faded into a colorless dawn, and the train cut through fields of mist and silence. The air was cold, sharper now that they were beyond the skyline. Mara sat near the open cargo door, her eyes fixed on the horizon as the first weak rays of sunlight broke through the clouds. The hum of the engine was almost soothing, but beneath it, fear still pulsed like a heartbeat. Every sound, the clatter of wheels, the shift of crates, reminded them that they were still being hunted. Raven hadn't spoken for hours. He sat across from Mara, cleaning his gun with mechanical precision. His face was unreadable, the kind of expression that comes from years of surviving by instinct alone. Eli broke the silence. "We can't keep running forever." His voice was rough, tired. "They'll trace the train eventually. There are sensors on every line past the border." Raven didn't look up. "That's why we jump before we reach it." Mara turned sharply. "Jump? You mean while it's still moving?" He nodded. "If we cross at a checkpoint, we're dead. If we stay on the train, they'll find it by satellite. The only chance we have is to disappear before they can triangulate." Eli swallowed hard. "Disappear where?" Raven glanced toward the distance. "There's an old crossing north of here. Decommissioned years ago after the border realignment. It's not on the maps anymore." Mara frowned. "How do you know it still exists?" "Because I helped build it." The way he said it made her pause. Raven's past was full of blank spaces, jobs, missions, and names he never spoke about. But sometimes, little fragments slipped through, like cracks in a wall. And each one made her wonder who he really was before all this began. The train slowed slightly as it approached a curve. The fields outside were giving way to hills now, dotted with old windmills and rusted fences. The world looked abandoned, like a place history had forgotten. Raven checked his watch. "We have 15 minutes. Gather what you need." Eli opened his pack and pulled out a folded map, its edges torn and faded. "Once we're off, we head north through the woods. There's a road near the ridge that leads toward the border." Mara tightened her jacket. "And after that?" "After that," Raven said, "we find proof." The train rattled loudly as it hit another section of track. The air grew colder. The sound of metal on metal echoed through the car like distant thunder. Raven stood by the door, gauging the speed. "Get ready." Mara stared at him, disbelief flickering in her eyes. "You've done this before, haven't you?" He allowed himself a faint, humorless smile. "Too many times." When the next bend came, Raven kicked the latch open. The door slid wide, wind roaring into the car. The landscape blurred, grey fields and dark trees whipping past at frightening speed. "Now," he shouted. He jumped first, vanishing into the tall grass below. Mara followed, heart pounding, the world spinning as she hit the ground and rolled. Eli came last, landing hard with a cry of pain. The train thundered away, disappearing into the mist. Silence returned heavy, almost sacred. Mara pushed herself up, brushing mud from her coat. Everyone alive? Raven rose, shaking off the dirt. Mostly. He looked at Eli, who was holding his ankle. Can you walk? Eli winced. I'll live. They were standing in the middle of nowhere, wide plains stretching endlessly toward the distant hills. The air smelled of wet grass and rust. Far in the distance, the faint outline of a radio tower stood like a ghost of civilization. Raven pointed north. That way. They walked for hours. The land sloped upward into rough terrain, the soil turning rocky beneath their feet. As they climbed, the fog thickened, turning the world into a blur of grey shapes. At one point, Mara stopped and looked back. The valley below was empty, silent, but something felt wrong. A low hum, almost mechanical, drifted through the fog. Raven, she whispered. Do you hear that? He stopped, listening. The sound grew louder, not a hum, but a drone. Raven's jaw tightened. Eyes in the sky. Move. They sprinted toward the cover of the trees, just as a black drone burst through the fog above, its lights scanning the ground like a predator's gaze. The sound of its rotors filled the air. Down! Raven hissed, pulling Mara behind a fallen log. The drone hovered above for a moment, then drifted on, its sensors sweeping the fields. Eli exhaled shakily. They're tracking heat signatures. Raven nodded. And they're close. He reached into his pack, pulled out a small metal box, and flipped a switch. The device emitted a faint pulse, invisible but powerful. The drone's light flickered, its sensors glitching. Mara watched in awe. What is that? Something we were never supposed to have, Raven said. EMP Scrambler short range. It buys us time. The drone wobbled, lost its balance, and crashed into the trees with a burst of sparks. Silence followed. Eli looked at him, astonished. You've been carrying that the whole time. Raven gave a small shrug. Old habits. They pressed on, deeper into the forest. The ground turned muddy, branches clawing at their clothes. The light faded as thick clouds rolled in overhead. By the time they reached the ridge, night was falling again. Below them, a river wound through the valley, its surface reflecting the last traces of daylight. There, Raven said, pointing. The crossing is just beyond that river. Eli looked doubtful. You're sure? As sure as I can be, Raven replied. They descended the slope carefully, using tree roots for balance. When they reached the water's edge, Mara knelt beside the river, her reflection shimmering in the current. She felt a strange stillness, a rare moment of quiet amid chaos. This place, she said softly, feels like the edge of the world. Raven looked out at the fading horizon. Maybe it is. Then he turned to her. Once we cross, there's no turning back. Whatever we find, whatever truth is waiting, it won't fix what's broken. It'll just show us who broke it. Mara met his gaze. I stopped believing in fixing things a long time ago. I just want to know why. Raven nodded slowly. Then let's find out. They waded into the river, the cold biting through their clothes. The current was strong, but they kept moving, step by step, until the water was behind them and the forest on the far side swallowed them whole. As they disappeared into the trees, the last light of day vanished, leaving nothing but the sound of flowing water and the distant echo of thunder, a reminder that the storm, though far behind, was still following. The forest was endless. For hours, the only sound was the crunch of wet leaves beneath their boots and the steady rhythm of their breathing. The deeper they went, the darker it became, the trees growing denser, the air colder, the silence heavier. Every few minutes, Raven stopped to listen, scanning the shadows as if expecting them to move. When dawn finally came, it was pale and uncertain, filtered through a ceiling of fog and branches. The world here felt untouched by time, no signs of life, no roads, no trails. Just wilderness, stretching in every direction. Eli was limping now, his ankle swollen from the jump. He tried to hide it, but Mara noticed. "Let's rest for a minute," she said, setting down her bag. Raven shook his head. "We can't stop yet. If the drones found our trail, they'll send ground units next." Eli gave a bitter laugh. "Do you ever get tired of being right?" Raven didn't answer. He looked at the sky, a dull, shifting grey. "There's a clearing ahead," he said. "Half a mile. We'll stop there." When they reached the clearing, they found the remains of what looked like an old military outpost, rusted fencing, collapsed watchtowers, a communications mast leaning at a dangerous angle. The ground was littered with broken crates and twisted metal. Whatever had happened here, it had ended violently. Mara approached the gate, her fingers tracing the faded insignia on a broken sign. "This place, it's from the old regime. They shut these down after the Accords." Raven knelt beside a shattered console, brushing away dirt. "Not all of them," he murmured. Eli frowned. "What do you mean?" Raven pointed to the power cables half buried under the debris. "This line's new. Less than 2 years old. Someone's been keeping this place alive." The realization hit them all at once. The outpost wasn't abandoned, it was hidden. Mara moved carefully through the wreckage, her instincts sharp. "You think it's still active?" Raven stood, scanning the structures. "We'll find out." They moved toward what was left of the main building, a squat concrete bunker half swallowed by moss and vines. The door was reinforced, but the control panel beside it was blinking faintly. Eli crouched to examine it. "This shouldn't have power," he said. "Not out here." Raven handed him a small tool set. "Can you bypass it?" Eli gave a tight smile. "You're asking a systems engineer if he can open a 30-year-old door? Watch me." He worked quickly, fingers moving with practiced precision. Sparks flared, wires clicked, and the light on the panel turned green. The door opened with a long, metallic groan. Inside, the air was stale, a mix of dust, oil, and something else. Electricity hummed faintly in the walls. The narrow corridor led downward, lit by a few surviving overhead lights that flickered like dying stars. Mara's voice echoed softly. "What is this place?" Raven ran his hand along the wall, feeling the cold metal beneath the layers of dust. "An intelligence relay station. They used these to monitor communications between border sectors. But this one, looks like it was reactivated." Eli powered on a nearby terminal. The screen came to life, faint at first, then clear. Lines of code scrolled across it, followed by a series of encrypted symbols. "This system's still connected to the main network," Eli said, eyes wide. "Someone's been sending data through here. Recently. Can you trace it?" Mara asked. "I can try." He typed rapidly, breaking through layers of outdated encryption. Then the screen changed, showing a map of several red dots spread across the country. Each dot pulsed with a slow, rhythmic glow. Raven leaned closer. "What are those?" "Active relay stations," Eli said. "There are dozens. Maybe hundreds. And they're all feeding data to one central point." Mara frowned. "Where?" Eli zoomed in. The map shifted, centering on a region deep within the northern mountains, an area officially marked as uninhabited. "There," he said quietly. "They call it Grid Zero." Raven's expression darkened. He had heard the name before, whispered among agents, dismissed as rumor. A place that didn't exist on paper, but controlled everything beneath it. Mara stepped back, her voice trembling. "So this is it. The heart of it all." Eli nodded slowly. "Whatever they've been doing, the surveillance, the false attacks, the cover-ups, it all starts there." Raven looked around the bunker. Then we know our destination. Before anyone could respond, the lights above flickered violently once, twice, then went out. The hum of the terminal died. Eli froze. That wasn't me. Raven drew his gun. We've been traced. A faint clicking echoed through the corridor, mechanical, deliberate. Then came footsteps, soft but steady. Mara's pulse quickened. How could they find us this fast? They didn't, Raven said grimly. They were already here. From the darkness, a voice emerged, calm, controlled, and unmistakably human. You shouldn't have come here. A figure stepped into the weak light of a flickering emergency bulb. Dressed in tactical gear, his face hidden behind a half-mask, he moved like someone who had been waiting for this moment. Raven raised his weapon. Who are you? The man tilted his head slightly. A friend once. Before you started asking the wrong questions. Mara whispered, he knows you. Raven's voice was cold. I used to know a lot of people. The man took another step forward. You think you've uncovered something new, but you're years too late. The world you're fighting to expose doesn't need to hide anymore. It owns everything, including the truth. Eli moved closer to the terminal, trying to retrieve the data, but the man noticed. Touch that again, he warned, and you'll never leave this place alive. Raven's grip tightened. You going to kill us? The man's eyes glinted behind the mask. Kill you? No. You're more useful alive. At least for now. Then, almost casually, he tossed a small metal sphere onto the floor. It rolled across the concrete, beeping softly. Smoke! Raven shouted, pulling Mara and Eli back. The device exploded in a flash of white, filling the room with choking haze. Shots rang out, glass shattered, alarms screamed. They stumbled toward the exit, half-blind. Mara felt a hand grab her arm. She turned, ready to strike, but it was Raven. Move! They burst into the daylight, coughing, running through the ruins as smoke poured from the bunker behind them. Eli looked back. He'll destroy everything in there. Raven didn't stop. Then we make sure what we learned doesn't die with it. The forest closed around them again, the outpost vanishing into the mist like a memory. Behind them, the explosion tore through the valley, a thunderous roar that echoed for miles. Mara turned to Raven, breathless. What now? He looked north, toward the mountains that loomed in the distance like sleeping giants. Now, he said, we go to Grid Zero. The journey north took 3 days. They moved mostly at night, staying off the main roads, avoiding drones and checkpoints. The forests thinned, giving way to steep cliffs and rivers that cut through the land like old scars. The mountains loomed closer each day, cold and blue against the grey sky. By the time they reached the foothills, exhaustion had settled into their bones. Their clothes were damp, their supplies nearly gone, but none of them spoke of turning back. The only thing that kept them moving was the thought of what waited for them ahead, the truth hidden inside Grid Zero. Raven led the way, his movements deliberate and silent. Every so often, he stopped to study the terrain, scanning the horizon for movement. Mara followed close behind, her rifle slung across her shoulder. The look in her eyes had changed, harder now, more certain. She wasn't running anymore, she was hunting. Eli struggled to keep up, clutching a small portable drive close to his chest. Inside it were fragments of the data they had pulled from the outpost, fragments that hinted at something much bigger. Something that could change everything. As night fell on the 3rd day, they found shelter in an abandoned mining cabin. The place was little more than a skeleton, cracked walls, broken furniture, a roof that moaned with every gust of wind. But it was enough to keep them hidden. Mara built a small fire, the flames painting her face in gold and shadow. She watched as Raven cleaned his weapon, every motion precise. Do you ever stop? She asked softly. Raven looked up. If I stop, I start thinking. And thinking is bad. He smiled faintly. It's dangerous. Eli sat near the fire, typing quietly on his device. The more I decrypt this, the worse it gets, he said. There's data here about resource routes, energy grids, even election systems. It's all interconnected. Controlled. Mara frowned. Controlled by who? He hesitated. That's the thing, the files never mention names. Just a symbol. A triangle inside a circle. Same emblem we saw at the outpost. Raven's eyes darkened. The Directorate. Mara turned to him. You know them. I've heard whispers. They were never official, not government, not military. They were above both. They manipulated wars, economies, even peace treaties. But no one ever proved they existed. Eli nodded slowly. Well, now we have proof. The wind howled outside, and for a moment, no one spoke. The truth hung between them, heavy and real. Finally, Mara broke the silence. So Grid Zero, it's their headquarters. Not a headquarters, Raven said quietly. A control hub. A place where information becomes power. Every lie, every secret, every piece of data, it all flows through there. Eli glanced at him. You sound like you've seen it. Raven looked into the fire, his voice barely a whisper. Once. Years ago. Before I realized what it really was. Mara leaned forward. What did you see? Rows of machines, huge, cold, silent. People monitoring feeds from every city. Surveillance on anyone they wanted. They could alter records, erase identities, rewrite events. I thought it was just an advanced intelligence project. But then I saw what they were doing with it. What? Eli asked. Raven met his eyes. Creating chaos. Manufacturing enemies. Controlling both sides of every conflict. They weren't protecting the world, they were redesigning it. Mara exhaled slowly. And you worked for them? I didn't know who they were, Raven said, his voice steady but hollow. By the time I found out, it was too late. Eli closed his laptop, his face pale in the firelight. Then what are we walking into? Raven stared at the flames. The center of the storm. They broke camp before dawn, moving silently through the narrow mountain pass. The air grew thinner, sharper. The ground turned to ice and stone. By midday, they reached a cliff that overlooked a vast valley. Below them, half buried beneath snow and rock, was a structure unlike anything they had ever seen, a massive complex of steel and glass, camouflaged to blend into the mountainside. Grid Zero. From above, it looked almost lifeless, no smoke, no movement, no visible guards. But Raven knew better. They're underground, he said. Everything important is below the surface. Mara studied the facility through binoculars. There's a service tunnel on the east ridge. It's guarded, but not heavily. Raven nodded. That's our way in. They waited until nightfall before descending. The wind screamed through the valley, carrying snow and whispers of danger. They moved like shadows, hugging the rocks, every step measured. Near the tunnel entrance, two guards stood under a dim floodlight, their rifles slung lazily. Raven signaled to the others. A few seconds later, the guards were down, silent, clean, efficient. Inside, the tunnel was cold and sterile, lined with metal and faint blue lights that pulsed like veins. The deeper they went, the louder the hum of machinery became. Eli stared at the walls. This isn't just a data center, he said. It's a living system. Mara glanced at him. Meaning? Meaning it's learning, Eli whispered. Adapting. They've built an AI infrastructure, one that can predict behavior, influence outcomes. It's not just watching the world. It's shaping it. They reached a sealed door marked authorized personnel only. Raven placed his palm on the scanner. For a moment, nothing happened, then the light turned green. Mara's eyes widened. How? I told you, Raven said. I've been here before. The door slid open with a hiss. What they saw inside froze them in place. The chamber stretched endlessly, filled with rows upon rows of servers' towers of black steel humming with energy. Between them moved figures in white suits, faces hidden behind masks. Above, a giant holographic display showed streams of live data, financial markets, global news, military feeds, civilian surveillance. It was the digital heart of the world. Mara whispered, "They're controlling everything." Raven nodded. "And this is just one hub. Imagine how many more there are." Eli stepped forward, mesmerized. "If we can access the main core, I can upload a data spike, a virus that exposes the network, releases everything to the public." "How long?" Raven asked. 10 minutes, maybe less." "Then let's move." They weaved through the corridors, avoiding patrols. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became. The hum of the machines wasn't just noise, it felt alive, like the building itself was aware of them. When they reached the central chamber, Eli plugged his drive into the main terminal. The screens around him flickered, symbols cascading across them like rain. "It's working," he said. "Just a few more seconds." Then the lights dimmed. A voice echoed through the speakers, calm, familiar, and chilling. "I told you before," it said. "You were too late." Mara's blood ran cold. "It's him. The man from the outpost." The voice continued, smooth and unhurried. "You thought you could break into Grid Zero and end it with a keystroke? You don't understand. You're part of it now." The screens shifted, showing live footage of them. Every move they had made since leaving the safe house. Every word, every step, recorded. Eli whispered, "He's been watching us this whole time." Raven clenched his fists. "Where are you?" he growled. "Closer than you think." At that moment, the far wall opened and the masked man stepped through, flanked by guards. Raven raised his weapon. "This ends now." The man smiled beneath the mask. "Yes," he said softly. "It does." The air in the chamber thickened as the masked man stepped closer, the cold glow of the servers washing over him like pale fire. His presence seemed to bend the room around him, commanding silence, demanding fear. The guards behind him moved with precision, trained, mechanical, loyal. Raven held his weapon steady, but his heartbeat was a storm. He had seen this man before in another life, under another name. The memories came in flashes, a briefing room, a handshake, a promise that none of it was personal. Now that same man stood before him, the architect of the chaos they'd been running from. "You were the best we had," the masked man said, his voice smooth as glass. "And you threw it away for what? A few stolen files? Some illusion of truth?" Raven's voice was low and sharp. "You're not protecting the truth. You're suffocating it." The man tilted his head slightly, as if amused. "And you think the world deserves it? You think they can handle the chaos that comes with knowing everything? People don't want freedom, Raven. They want control, someone to believe in, even if that someone lies." Mara stepped forward. "That's not your choice to make." He looked at her, eyes cold behind the mask. "It's everyone's choice. We just made it first." Eli was still at the console, his fingers flying across the keys. "Keep him talking," he whispered. "The spike's almost ready." Raven took a step closer. "You built a system to manipulate everything, governments, markets, even memories. You call that control? I call it fear." "Fear is stability," the man replied. "And stability is profit. You of all people should understand that you helped build it." Raven's grip tightened on his weapon. "And I'm going to destroy it." The man gave a faint laugh. "You can't destroy an idea, Raven. You can only replace it." A red light flashed on the terminal. Eli's voice broke through the tension. It's in. Uploading now. The man's expression shifted. No. He raised his hand, and the guards opened fire. The chamber erupted in chaos, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing off steel, the sparks from ricochets lighting the air. Mara dove behind a console, returning fire with deadly precision. Raven grabbed Eli, dragging him to cover as bullets tore through the room. How long? He shouted. 30 seconds. Eli yelled back. Just keep them off me. Raven rose from behind the console, firing in controlled bursts. One guard went down, then another. The masked man moved through the chaos like a phantom, calm, untouched, his focus locked on Raven. You still don't understand, he said, voice echoing over the alarms. This isn't about data or control, it's about survival. The world doesn't function on truth. It collapses under it. Raven fired again, the shot grazing the man's shoulder. The impact tore part of the mask away, revealing half of his face scarred, but unmistakable. Mara froze. Oh my God, you're... Raven's breath caught. Cain. The name hung in the air like a wound. Eli glanced up from the terminal. Who is he? Raven's voice was hoarse. He was my partner. Cain smiled a small, broken smile. You left me to die, remember? That mission in Orlena. You called for extraction, but it never came. You think I forgot? Raven's chest tightened. I tried to save you. You tried to save yourself, Cain spat. They abandoned me, but they showed me the truth, the real structure beneath everything. I stopped fighting it. I became it. Eli shouted, upload complete. The monitors flickered violently, data streams exploding across the screens. The network had been breached. Files, recordings, secret communications, everything was being released in real time. Cain turned toward the display, rage breaking through his composure. Do you have any idea what you've done? Raven lowered his weapon. Set the world free. Cain drew a small remote from his belt. No, you've set it on fire. He pressed the button. Sirens screamed. The floor trembled. The lights began to flicker and die as systems overloaded. A recorded voice filled the chamber, containment breach detected. Reactor meltdown in progress. Eli's eyes went wide. He's triggered a failsafe. Move. Raven shouted. They ran, sprinting through corridors that shook with the force of the collapsing structure. Sparks rained from the ceiling, and flames erupted from ruptured conduits. Behind them, the servers exploded one by one, each burst like thunder. Mara grabbed Eli's arm as he stumbled. Come on. They burst through a maintenance tunnel, the sound of destruction chasing them. Ahead, faint light glimmered at the tunnel's end, the exit. Cain's voice echoed through the intercom, distorted but clear. You think